This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome everyone. Bruchim Aboim. Agen Kvittel, Aget Yar, Apiska Tava. Shkoyach everyone for coming. It's a nice mix. We have Baruch Hashem, a nice showing from the shul and from Kal Torah Semes in Queens and of course Chavirim from Chol Tfutzos Yisrael. So shkoyach everyone for coming, and we should be zoichem Eretz Hashem next year to be sitting Tachas Sukkasei Shel Yasa and V'mher V'yameinu Amen. So Leil Hoshana Rabba is a Shpizin of David HaMelech. It's the Chasima Gedoyla. It's we know a Sukkos we're Nidoin Al Hamayim, and even though on all the Yomim Tovim are Yomei Din, but nevertheless, the human life is dependent on Mayim, and therefore Sukkos is the most important of all the Meidin. And Hoshana Rabba is the Chasima Gedoyla for Mayim. And Melchemes Gog uMagog, of course, which we have a tradition, takes place on the Yom Tov of Sukkos, and concludes tonight. Tonight is the conclusion of Melchemes Gog uMagog. We know Gog uMagog is Gematria 70, Keneged the Shivim Umois, who are Poiches V'Hoilech, they dissipate. Finally, on Hoshana Rabba, they come to their complete destruction. So we should be taka b'zoicha to see the destruction of all the Sonei Yisrael, b'vias Goyal Tzedek. So tonight I want to speak about, we're laning now the end of the Torah, we're laning Mishnah Torah, we're laning the end of Sefer Devarim, and really the last days of the life of Moshe Rabbeinu. We know Sefer Devarim begins with Rosh Chodesh Shvat, and Moshe Rabbeinu only lives a total of 37 days in Sefer Devarim. And amazingly, Moshe Rabbeinu says in Parshas Vayelech, Moshe says, "Vayomer aleim ben me'ah ve'esrim shana anochi hayom." I'm 120 days today, 120 years today. La yuchal od lotzeis v'lavoi. I cannot be loichem the Melchamto shel Torah. Hashem Omar Elai lo saveres hayarden hazeh. Hashem told me I can't cross into Eretz Yisrael. So apparently Moshe Rabbeinu at the end of the Devarim is talking the last day of his life. This is the last day of Moshe Rabbeinu's life. And the Gemara says, from here we learn a very important yesod. The Gemara in Soita says, from here we learn if Moshe Rabbeinu says, today I'm 120 years, Vayomer aleim ben me'ah ve'esrim shana anochi hayom, ein Talmud loymar hayom, hayom malu yomai ushnoisai. Today my days are complete, today my years are complete, lilamedcha shakadosh baruch hu mashlim shnoiseiim shel tzadikim miyom liyom umechodesh l'chodesh. That there's a concept that tzadikim, they pass away on the same day of their birth, they pass away on the same month of their birth. And by the way, Rabbi Kiva Eger explains very beautifully. Rabbi Kiva Eger explains that really everybody should pass away on the day they were born, because Ribbon Shalom is the master craftsman, and we know if somebody creates a watch, so the watch is perfectly tuned. If you have a special master craftsman, the watch always remains fine-tuned, provided that the user uses it properly. So if you treat your Rolex properly, it will have exact time for its entire career. So Hashem creates a person. They're like a watch. The heart ticks, tick, 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 and when it comes time to go, a person should really go on the day that they were born. Elamai, we don't handle the merchandise properly. We don't treat ourselves properly. We don't live the way we should. But tzaddikim, of course, tzaddikim, they'll pass away the day they were created because they treat the guf, the watch, the merchandise, the way the Rebbeinu Shalom intended. Be it as it may, Moshe Rabbeinu was born on the day that he died. He was born on the day of his demise. And what day is that? Anybody know what day was Moshe Rabbeinu nifter? Zayin Adar. The Gemara in Soita doesn't say that. The Tosefta in Soita says, how do I know Moshe Rabbeinu was born on Zayin Adar and he passed away on Zayin Adar? From this pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu says, Ben me'ah ve'esrim shana anochi hayom. From here we learn Moshe was born on Zayin Adar and he was nifter on Zayin Adar as well. The Gemara in Kedushin though says it befeirosh that Moshe Rabbeinu was born on Zayin Adar and he was niftar on Zayin Adar. Shenemar vayomer aleim ben me'ah ve'esrim shana anochi hayom lo'uchal oid lotzeis v'lavai. So from here we learn Hashem is mamale the life of tzaddikim miyom liyom umechodesh l'chodesh. Comes the Marsha, and the Marsha asks a very interesting question. Hashem is mamale the days of the tzaddikim. It says miyom liyom. It says mechodesh l'chodesh, but the Gemara doesn't say mishana l'shana. Why doesn't it say mishana l'shana? Wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu 120 years old? Says Marsha, no, he wasn't 120 years old. Because actually, if you're born on Zayin Adar, when do you become 120 years old? On Vav Adar. Vav Adar, you've completed your 120th year. Zayin Adar is already the beginning of the next year. Technically speaking in halacha, Yom Echad L'Shana is Kashana Mole for Bar Mitzvah. When is a kid 13? When he's 13 in a day, he's already a Bar Mitzvah. 1 day in a year is a year. So it comes out, says the Maharsha, Moshe Rabbeinu was not 120 years old when he passed away. Moshe Rabbeinu was halachically 121 years old when he passed away. That's why the Gemara says Hashem is Mamale Shnoisem Shal Tzadikim Miyoim Liyoim Zayin Adar to Zayin Adar. Mechodesh L'chodesh. What is Mechodesh L'chodesh? Adar to Adar. But Meishana L'shana not. Because Moshe Rabbeinu did not live a complete last year. His last year was a segment of a year. In fact, the Maharsha says, the remez to this idea is Rebbeinu Shem always does something like this. Amales, Mispar Yamecha Amale. If you take out the first aleph of Amalei, says Maharsha, you get Mem Lamed Aleph. What's the gematria Mem Lamed Aleph? 71. So really the human lifespan is 70 years. But Hashem adds a year to the tzaddik, a day into the next year, because Rebbeinu Shalom gives overtime. Hashem pays extra. So in reality, says Maharsha, Moshe did not live 120 years. He lived 121 years. You see me, Shaya? Good? Me and on the camera. Two of me, right? You see both of them. Okay, good. So I have to make sure the treasurer sees me, okay? So 121 years. Comes Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz asks, so then what's Moshe Rabbeinu saying? Ben Mea ve'esrim shana anochi hayom, then I'm 120 years old. He wasn't 120 years old. He's 121 years old. That's the kasha of Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. The truth is, I was bothered by this question for many years. This year is many years in the making. I had it like 87% until basically Erev Shabbos. I was always bothered by this question. I think I maybe even heard somebody ask this question. How come we always say Moshe Rabbeinu was 120 years old? If he was born on Zayin Adar and he was niftar on Zayin Adar, then in truth, he lived 121 years. And in fact, the Maharsha says he did live 121 years. So ask Rabbi Yonasan, why does Moshe Rabbeinu say, today I'm 120 years old? In fact, today he's 121 years old. Tonight we're going to speak about the last day of the life of Moshe Rabbeinu. What did Moshe Rabbeinu do on his last day? So the Gemara says that it's a good siman if before a person goes, they're sick for a certain amount of time. 1 day is not good. It's too quick. 2 days is not good either, but it's better than 1 day. 3 days, the perfect amount of time is 5 days. And the Gemara learns it out from Moshe Rabbeinu. So Tosfos asks, Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't sick. Because we know, Ad Yom HaAchroin, Moshe Rabbeinu was busy, he was walking in the Machane Yisrael, he was busy. And the Lashon of Tosfos is, if you look at number 7, Uviyoim Moisei Kasav Harbe. On the day of his death, Moshe wrote a lot. What did he write already? Well, he wrote a lot. What did Moshe Rabbeinu write? Tosfos doesn't say what he wrote. Tosfos doesn't say exactly. He just says Kasav Harbe. We know from the Rambam, the Lashon of the Rambam in 2 places, in his Hakdama to the Yad HaChazaka, and his Hakdama to Perush HaMishnayos, is that Moshe Rabbeinu, before his Petira, he wrote 12 Sifrei Torah plus 1. He wrote 12 Sifrei Torah to give to each Shevet, and he was very smart. He wrote 1 to put in the Arayin. Because if he's going to give 1 to each Shevet, then one Shevet is going to have in their Sefer Torah Daven Nusach Ashkenaz, one Shevet is going to have Daven Nusach Sfard, one Shevet is going to have Yes Mishnah Torah, one Shevet is going to have no Mishnah Torah. So he put 1 Sefer Torah in the Arayin as like the master copy, that this way nobody tampers with the original text. The Lashon of the Rambam is, he wrote his Sifrei Torah Lifnei Moshe. When Lifnei Moshe? The Rambam doesn't say. Now if I were to ask you, how long does it take to write a Sefer Torah? It takes quite a while. I never commissioned the writing of Sefer Torah. It probably takes at least a year for an average person if they do it all day long to write a Sefer Torah. So the Rambam says, Koidem Moshe. You wouldn't have thought it would have been a week or a month before his death. You would think he started sometime before his death. And in fact, there's a Sefer, Ma'ar Ha'afela, by Rabbi Nesanel, one of the Chachmei Teiman, who learns that Pshat in the Rambam, that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Sifrei Torah, Koidem Moshe, is that he started Rosh Chodesh Shvat at the beginning of Sefer Devarim, and over 37 days he wrote 13 Sifrei Torah, which is certainly an incredible feat. To write 13, even to write 1 Sefer Torah in 37 days is an incredible feat. But according to the Mar HaAfela Pshat and Tosfos, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote 13 Sifrei Torah in his last 37 days. And even the Mar HaFil asks, how could Moshe Rabbeinu have done such a thing? He was as a nes. It was a miracle. It was miraculous that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to write 13 Sifrei Torah in his last 37 days. The Pashut Pshat in the Psukim, though, is that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote all 13 Sifrei Torah in the last 6 hours of his life. If you look in the Pasuk, if you look at number 11, Vayichtov Moshe es hashira hazois bayom hahu, vayalamda espanesa. Moshe wrote the song on that day. Says the Medrash in 3 Mekayimos. Says the Medrash. Amar Rabbi Yanai, Kasav Shloish Esrei Toros, Shteim Esrei. Here, look at the Lashon of the Medrash. Rabbanan Amri, Kivan Shiyada Moshe Shahaya Loi Lamas Ba'isei Hayoim. When Moshe knew he was going to die on that day, Ma'asa, what did he do? Amar Rav Yanai, Kasav Shloish Esrei Toros. He wrote 13 Sifrei Torah. Shteim Esrei L'Shteim Asar Shvatim. V'achas Hiniach Ba'oroin. So that if somebody wanted to forge it, there was a master copy. This is what the Medrash Rabba says. This is what the Medrash Shoichar Tov says. This is what the Psikta of Rav Kahana says. That Moshe wrote all 13 Sifrei Torah b'yoymai ha'achrei. Come the Rishonim, the Rosh, the Mordechai, and Tosus and Menachos, and they bring the following tradition. Some Jews have a minhag. They don't learn on Shabbos between Mincha and Marav. Why? Because some people are makbid not to learn the whole year. But specifically, between Mincha and Marav, they don't learn. Why? Okay, so, what? Because since Moshe Rabbeinu passed away between Mincha and Marav, and when a Talmid Chacham passes away, Beis Medrash is batal. When Talmid Chacham passes away, you're now to learn. You have to give cover to the Chacham who passed away. And Moshe Rabbeinu passed away between Mincha and Marav. That's the reason why we say it's Tzidkascha. Why do we say Tzidkascha? Says the Tshuvas Haga'onim, because Moshe Rabbeinu died between Mincha and Marav on Shabbos. So in honor of Moshe Rabbeinu, there are those who are noyeg not to learn on Shabbos, Bein Mincha L'Marav. This is what's written in the Tshuvas Haga'onim, and this is one of the opinions in the Zohar, that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away Leil on Shabbos, close to the end of the day, and therefore we say Tzidkascha, and we don't learn. So comes the Rosh, comes the Mordechai, and comes Tosus. Tosus quotes the Sar Shalom Hagoin Sar Shalom, who says we say Tzidkascha, Tziddik Hadin on Shabbos by Mincha, because Moshe Rabbeinu passed away at that time. Ask the Rishonim the obvious question. If Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Shabbos, how could he possibly have passed away on Shabbos? The Medrash says, the Psikta says, the Medrash Shoichar Tov says, that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote 13 Sifrei Torah b'yoymai ha'achrein. He wrote 13 Sifrei Torah. So you want to say it's impossible to write 13 Sifrei Torah? Fine. However he did it. But if you're going to say that he did it, how is it possible? How could that be reconciled with the Messiah of the Tshuvas Haga'onim that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Shabbos? So how could he have written the 13 Sifrei Torah on Shabbos? That's the Kasha, the Rosh, the Mordechai, and Tosus. And therefore they conclude that the Tshuvas Haga'onim is wrong, and the Kabbalah is wrong, that Moshe Rabbeinu did not pass away on Shabbos. Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Friday. That's a sheet of Tosus. That it's not correct. That you cannot say that Moshe passed away on Shabbos. Otherwise, how did he write the Sifrei Torah? And therefore, so why do we say Tzidkascha, says Tosus? We say Tzidkascha because the Neshamas are about to go back to the Gehenna. And therefore, we're matzdik to din that the Neshamas go back to Gehenna. But to say that we say Tzidkascha because Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, so how did he write the 13th Sifrei Torah? That's what we're going to address tonight. How could Moshe Rabbeinu have passed away on Shabbos and yet have written Yud Gimel Sifrei Torah? So here's the first teretz. The first teretz is the Shla Kadosh, and it does not appear in any of the writings of the Shla. The Chassam Sofer in the Tshuvas quotes the Shla, and the Stipler on Masechta Baba Kama quotes the Shla. That's the only two places that the Shla is found. The Chassam Sofer and the Stipler.
Does the Stipler quote the Chassam Sofer?
No. And Chassam Sofer says like this: Moshe Rabbeinu Avada passed away on Shabbos, like the Kabbalah and the Tshuvas Haga'onim. So how do you write 13 Sifrei Torah? Says Chassam Sofer, there's a special shame that you could say. You say the shame, the pen jumps up, and the pen writes by itself. Says Chassam Sofer, that type of ksiva is not ksiva that writes on Shabbos. That's how Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Sifrei Torah. You have to say that, otherwise how did he write 13 Sifrei Torah? It's not a humanly possible feat. So says Chassam Sofer, Moshe Rabbeinu used something called hashba'as kolmos. The Stipler also brings down this idea, hashba'as kolmos, and therefore through hashba'as kolmos, it is permitted to write on Shabbos. In fact, Chassam Sofer in the Torah Moshe and Vayakel says this idea on his own, that it has to be that the only way Moshe Rabbeinu could have written in the 13 Sifrei Torah is he used the Shem, and the Shem wrote by itself. Chassam Sofer writes in the Tshuvas, you think I believe in this stuff? That a person could just say, hocus pocus, and a pen is going to jump up and write a Sefer Torah? You better believe I believe in this stuff. I saw my Rebbe, the Kohen Tzedek, Rav Nosson Adler. I saw him use Shemos, and they really work. So it's not really a pella that Moshe Rabbeinu knew Shemos, and he was able to do. He was able to change nature. Rava bara Gavra says Chassam Sofer Sanhedrin Samachay. The Gemara in Yevamah says Yeshaya was being chased by Menashe. Yeshaya said a shame, and he turned into a tree. Achi Toifel, the Gemara says in Sukkah, when he was meddling around with the Tahaimais. Remember the Gemara with the Shitin? And he dug a little too deep, and the water was in danger of flooding the world. Achi Toifel had to say a shame. And the Chassam Sofer's Megala and the Tshuva, what the shame was. It was the shame of coffee. Kuf Pei Aleph is the shame. So you want to know why is coffee is a shame. First of all, when you drink it, here you have a guy, he's mamish dead, and he drinks it, and he has Tchiyas Hamesim. Good audience, right? So the pshat is, Kuf Pei Aleph is kale b'miluai. If you take the shem kale, aleph lamed, you spell up aleph lamed pei, lamed mem dalid is kuf pei aleph. That's one of the shemos. That's the shem of flooding. So if you live in Cedar Bay Park, be aware, kuf pei aleph. That's the shem to prevent flooding. And then the Chassam Sofer says, let me be megala to you the shem to write Sifrei Torah. The shem to write Sifrei Torah is keses. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch wrote a sefer, the Keses HaSofer. Why is Keses the shame of writing Sifrei Torah? Torah, Tziva, Lanu, Moshe. Rashi Teva is Taf, Tzadi, Lamed, Mem. Gematria, what? 560, Keses. That's the shame that Moshe Rabbeinu did to write 13 Sifrei Torah. That is the first answer to the question. Says Chassam Sofer, Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Shabbos. So how do you write 13 Sifrei Torah? He used the shame. And it's not a strange thing that Moshe used the shame. Let me just share with you very briefly. We have two Gedolim that we have a tradition that they wrote their Sfarim al Yidei Shemais. And it did not sit well with me. One of them does not sit well with me. But what can we do? The Chidah writes in the Magal Tov that how is it possible for the Shach on Yerodea to write so much? Shach on Yerodea? We have a tradition the Shach had a shame, and that's how it was written. So, to me, you can't say the Shach said a shame and that's how the Shach appeared. Torah is loy b'shamayim. It doesn't work that way. Pshat is the Shach came up with the Chidushim. He knew the Psak. That he came through his own Amelos. Now it's a matter of recording it on paper, so that's tedious work, so maybe he used the shame to help him out. That's the only thing he could say. In the Sefer Zecher David, he says, this I didn't know, who is the most prolific author of all time? Moshe Cordovero. He says, if you look at what Moshe Cordovero wrote, the Pardes Rimonim, which is huge, is nothing. The biggest sefer ever written is a sefer called Elima, which the Ramak wrote on Yud Beis Mayanois, Ayin Tmarim, on the entire Zoyar, Raya Mehemna, Tikunei Zoyar, Sefer HaYetzira, as big as Shas Bavli. The only thing, Shas Bavli was written by 100 Chachamim. How did the Ramak write so much by himself? The answer is, he used Shemos HaKsiva. That's what's in. That the Ramak used Shemos. So how did Moshe Rabbeinu write Yud Gimel Sifrei Torah b'Yom HaAchron? He used Shemos. In fact, the Tzror Hamar, Rabbi Avram Saba, he writes that what Moshe Rabbeinu did at the end of his life, you look at number 25, V'zeh be'emes me'anisim ha'gedolim shebechol ha'Torah. This is one of the biggest miracles in Kol HaTorah Kula. I don't think I even knew that. If you ask, what are the biggest miracles in the Torah? You know, the Makkos, Kriyas Yamsuf, Kabbalas HaTorah. Would anyone even have thought the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote 13 Sifrei Torah b'Yom HaAchron, says it's Amar, one of the greatest nisim that Moshe Rabbeinu ever accomplished, one of the greatest feats ever accomplished, was that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote 13 Sifrei Torah b'Yom HaAchron. If you look in the Lashon al-Alshich, we go back number 23 for a moment. He says, Ma osam biksas mehayom. What did Moshe Rabbeinu do on his last day? Kasav kol ha-Torah mi bereshis ad la'inei kol Yisrael. L'man yiru kol Yisrael v'yoimru. So that Klal Yisrael should see now, this is what the Alshach says, and I think according to the Alshach it comes out a new reason. That even though when Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Luchos, the Alshach says it looked like Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Luchos, but in reality it was Rabbeinu Shalom who was carving out the Luchos. Kach bekosvay Sefer HaTorah hoya nira ki'ilu Moshe HaKosev ach HaKadosh Baruch Hu hoya oisa be'etzem. Really the Rabbeinu Shalom was doing it. Lefizeh, could be. Now Moshe Rabbeinu did write the Sifrei Torah b'yom ha'achron. Either he didn't do it, really the Rabbeinu Shalom did it, or they did it together, and Shnayim Sha'asu are Pater. Right? That's the concept that Avram Avinu did Milah, he did Milah on Yom Kippur. There's a shayla, how is he allowed to do it? Shalei Bizmanoi. The Pirkei Rabbi Lezer says Hashem was Messiah, Shnayim Sha'asu is Pater. So it could be that the Rabbeinu Shalom was Messiah, and Shnayim Sha'asu is Pater. So we have two answers so far. Either Moshe used a shame, or the Rabbeinu Shalom Be'etzem did it himself, or he helped Moshe Rabbeinu. That's how he was able to do it. There's a tshuva in the Siach Yitzchak, where he suggests that really it's impossible that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote 13 Sifrei Torah b'yom ha'achron. He couldn't have even done it in a month. What he did was, he basically finished off 13 Sifrei Torah until he got to the last 8 psukim. Okay, the last 8 psukim, very nice. But you're now to write even one letter. Now the Gemara says that Moshe Rabbeinu Zashita wrote the last 8 psukim bedema, with tears. Now tears is ksav, she'yev shaleskayim. It's not a permanent ksav. You're not chayiv if you write bedema. So Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it on Shabbos bedema, and after he passed away, either Yoshua wrote it be'ink, or Moshe himself put it be'ink, b'diyai. Yeah. But the Mefarshim ask, well, who filled it in? If Moshe filled it in, it had been that day was Shabbos. If Yeshua filled it in, it can't be he filled it in later, when the Ksav wasn't there, he had to fill it in on that day. So how did Yeshua fill it in? And then he asks another question. He asks, Dema is possible to write a Sefer Torah. You can't write a Sefer Torah, but Dema, imagine if the Sefer, you come to the Sefer Torah, he wrote it B'Dema. I mean, it's ridiculous, it's possible. Sefer Torah written B'Dema, halacha l'maisa is possible l'chol adeyos. So what does it mean Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it B'Dema? So that question, the Rama MiPano addresses, and he says that there's a makoim in the ayin, in the ishoy, in the bas ayin, in the black people of the eye, that has black tears like ink, and you could write a Sefer Torah from those tears. Don't try it at home, but that's what the Rama MiPano says, that there's a pocket of black tears, thick black tears, and he says when Moshe wrote it, his ayin was not chasar, and the Sefer Torah was kosher. The answer that I want to bring out tonight is the answer of the Rama MiPano. I looked for it for a very long time. It's quoted in Shalsut Shuvas She'elas Yavitz, Rabbi Yaakov Emden. Rabbi Yaakov Emden introduces this answer by saying, the only one who's able to make shalom between Bavli, Medrash, and the Zohar is Rama MiPano. He's oiseh shalom b'mroimo v'yaseh shalom aleinu. He's able to reconcile all Ma'amorei Chazal, that they all fit together. And let's introduce this idea with a very important concept for Hoshana Rabba. We spoke by Shalshudas today. We spoke out the Ramban, Rabbeinu B'chaye, the Roikeach, the Rama, that there's an ancient custom that the night of Hoshana Rabba, you go out into the fields. Now I'll tell you, do you want to know the original ancient custom? I'll tell you in a minute. And you look, you see the moon. See, that's the moon. And the moon shines on you. And it makes a shadow. And if that shadow makes another shadow, you're going to live out the year. And if it doesn't make another shadow, you're not going to live out the year. Say, oh, that's superstitious. We don't believe in that. So Gemara in Hariyas Daf Yud Gimel, the Gemara says, if you want to know if you're going to live out the year, go out into the light. If you see the shadow of the shadow, you're going to live. If you don't see the shadow, you're not going to live. Says the Ramban, says what is that talking about? What night of the year do you need to see the shadow of your shadow? Says the Rishonim, it refers to the night of Hoshana Rabba. Says the Ramban, it's a pasuk in Chumash. When Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Meraglim, don't worry, we're going to destroy the enemies in Canaan. Sart sila me'aleim. Their shadows have left. so we'll be able to kill them. Says Rama, what does it mean the shadows have left? That means the night of Hoshana Rabbah, if you don't have a shadow, you're not going to make it through the year. Says Moshe, I know the night of Hoshana Rabbah, the people in Canaan did not have a shadow, therefore we're going to kill them, don't be afraid. The entire year, says Rabban, is merumas in the shadow of your shadow, the night of Hoshana Rabbah. Comes the Rama, and the Rama brings us down Lamaisa. However, the Rama says, don't do it. Because what's going to happen if you don't see the shadow of your shadow? You're going to be afraid. And if you're afraid, you get bad mazel. If you have bad mazel, then taka, you're not going to make it. So don't even, you shouldn't tell your children about this. I know people have anxiety about this. I saw in the magazines already, they have an advertisement for anxiety pills for people who don't see the shadow of their shadow on Hoshana Rabbah night, kosher, with all the, don't look into it, okay? They have for stage fright, for public speaking, and for lack of shadow on Hoshana Rabbah. Don't look at it. But the Rama said, don't look at it. But Lamaisa, Al Pi the Rishonim, there's a real thing. In fact, that Vudraham brings down, the night of Hoshana Rabbah, people would get undressed, put on linen garments, go out into the field, remove their garments completely, stand in the moonlight, Zavudraham, and see if they could see the shadow of their hands. Each finger represents their boys, and the left side is the girls, and depending on whether you see all your fingers, that's everything is alluded to in the shadow. Interesting. The Roikeach says further. The Roikeach says that every human being has two dimensions to it. You have, your physical dimension, your body, and in your body is your neshama. What percent of your neshama is in your body? Kamat, it's negligible. Your neshama is not really in your guf. Most of the neshama trickles up, until finally it's tachas kisei hakavod, together with all the neshamas of Klal Yisrael. Your body to your neshama is like your shoe to your body. Nobody lives in their shoe unless you're an old lady. Most people don't live in your shoe. Only your foot is in your shoe. The same way only your foot is in your shoe, only the lowest part of the neshama is in the guf. So you have your body, and you have a small part of the neshama. This is called Tselem HaTachton. Then everybody has a Tselem HaElyon. Tselem HaElyon is, every Jew has a spiritual entity which is in Shamayim right now, that is aware of certain things that are happening, that will happen, could see the future, could see what Hashem has in store. Every human being has Tselem HaElyon. The Gemara often says, sometimes a person is afraid. They don't know why. Ihu loy chazi, mazlei chazlei. They don't know, but they're mazel in Shamayim. Their supernatural being recognizes it. You have a Tselem HaTachton, you have a Tselem HaElyon. Says the Roikeach, when we say that the night of Hoshana Rabbah you need to have a tselem, it refers to the tselem ha'elyon. The night of Hoshana Rabbah, the tselem ha'elyon is very prominent. The rest of the year maybe we're not as in touch with it, but the night of Hoshana Rabbah, when we say you need to have a tzel, it means the tselem ha'elyon. Okay, that's the hakdama, that's the introduction. This is brought in all the Rishonim, most notably the Roikeach. Comes the Rama MiPano, and Rama MiPano says like this, that the truth is that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Friday. You know what day he passed away? Vav Adar. And the truth is, Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Shabbos. You knew the whole thing already? You chapped it? What? You knew? What? A good shear makes that you thought you knew it the whole time, right? So Shabbos, so Moshe Rabbeinu really passed away on Friday. And Moshe Rabbeinu really passed away Shabbos, before Mincha, at the time of Tzidkascha. How's that possible? So the Bach, I'm going to tell you two ways of saying, the Bach quotes the Rama MiPano, that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Friday, and the Kavura was Shabbos by Mincha time, but since the Neshama until the Kavura is still in the embrace of the Shechina, so it's Ke'ilu Moshe Rabbeinu also passed away on Shabbos, so really Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Friday, but the Kavura was Shabbos. That's how the Bach quotes the Rama MiPano. But that's not really what the Rama MiPano says, that's not how Rabbi Yaakov Emden quotes the Rama MiPano. That on Shabbos, on Friday, Moshe Rabbeinu tells Klal Yisrael the following words. Vayomer aleim ben meya ve'esrim shana anoichi hayoim lo yuchal oid lotzeis v'lavadi. I can't debate in Torah anymore. Can't debate in Torah, why not? Moshe Rabbeinu's tselem ha'elyon departed. Memela, it's Keilu Moshe Rabbeinu was mess on Vav Adar. Hashem was Mamale Yamav, Chadashav, Ushanoisav. But he still lived until Shabbos by Mincha. He didn't pass away until Shabbos by Mincha. When did he write the Yud Gimel Sifrei Torah? He wrote it on Friday. Chas v'shal Moshe Rabbeinu did not write any Sifrei Torah on Shabbos. His Yom HaAchroin, because in the eyes of Moshe Rabbeinu, as long as he's able to be Loichei Melchamta Shel Torah, he's a Chai. Once he's not able anymore to be Loichei Melchamta Shel Torah, so it's Lo Yuchal Oid Lotzis V'Lavoi, that's the Yom of his Petira. That's how Rabbi Yaakov Emden quotes the Rama MiPano. Okay, we're almost there. In the Tashbetz Katan. Tashbetz Katan is the Talmud Mavuk of the Marami Rothenburg. How does Sefer Yoshua begin? Moshe Avdi Meis. Moshe, my servant, died. The Oisios Shnios of Moshe Avdi Meis. What are the Oisios Shnios of Moshe Avdi Meis? Shabbos. Is a remez that Moshe passed away on Shabbos. Comes the Chida and the Dvash Lafi. Why is Moshe's Petira alluded to in the Oisios Shnios? Why is it not alluded to in the Oisios Rishonos? Because only the second Petira of Moshe was Shabbos. The first Petira of Moshe was Friday. So that's why the remez to Shabbos is Oisios Shnios, says the Chida. In fact, the Bnei Yissaschar quotes the Tashbetz and quotes the Chida, and he says this answers the Kasha of the Rosh, that really Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on Friday, and he wrote the Yud Gimel Sifrei Torah on Friday. Okay, and it says Bnei Yissaschar, I'm going to add my own remez. The gematria of Moshe Avdi Meis is Ani Eis Ratzain. That's why Shabbos by Mincha we say Vani Silasi Lecha Hashem Eis Ratzain. Says Rama MiPano, let's get clear what happened. His Tselem Ha'elyon left on Shabbos. His Shalom Elyon left on Friday. His Neshama left on Shabbos. He wrote the Yud Gimel Sifrei Torah on Friday. Yud Friday was Vav Adar. His Yom HaPtira was Zayin Adar. So how... one thing I was a little hesitant to say was that when the Rishonim say that on Hoshana Rabba you need to have a shadow, is that the same thing as the Tselem Ha'elyon? So Baruch Hashem, by Shalashudis, I said over the Shiur about the shadows, I happened to see in the Roikeach that the Roikeach learns that the definition of the Tzel that the Rishonim speak about when it comes to Hoshana Rabba is this Tselem Ha'elyon, this supernatural being that exists in Shamayim. Be it as it may, so it comes out very beautiful. It comes out Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on a Friday. On B'Yom HaAchron he wrote Yud Gimel Sifrei Torah. On that day he said Lo Yuchal Oid Lotzis V'Lavai. So let's come back to the original question. Let's come back to the question of Rabbi Yonasan. So it comes out Moshe Rabbeinu was 121 years old. The answer should be very pashut. Moshe Rabbeinu never lived 121 years. Moshe Rabbeinu was Nifter Vav Adar. He continued to live to Zayin Adar. Moshe Rabbeinu only considered it that he lived till Vav Adar. It happens to be Zayin Adar is when the Hastalkus of his neshama completely. Now, Rabbi Yonasan says a similar answer. He quotes the Megala Amukos that the neshama leaves the day before a person passes away. That's also an interesting idea. That a person's neshama leaves the guf a day before. We're saying slightly different. This is the way the Rama MiPano himself says it. That Moshe Rabbeinu's Tselem Ha'elyon left on Vav Adar, Erev Shabbos, and Moshe Rabbeinu's Tselem HaTachton was Nifter on Zayin Adar. So, these are some of the Soidos of the Yom HaAchron of Moshe Rabbeinu and the Ksiva of the Yud Gimel Sifrei Torah. And now we come to the end of the Torah. We come to the Zois HaBracha, the bracha that Moshe Rabbeinu gives Klal Yisrael. It's interesting, the last 8 psukim of the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote B'dema. The inyan is, these 8 psukim are from the Shar Nun of the Torah, the highest level of Torah. So the Master Rekech wants to know, so if Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't really alive, so why did Hashem give him that extra day? So what did he do on that last day? He didn't write the Sifrei Torah. He wrote the Sifrei Torah on Friday. So what did Moshe Rabbeinu do that Shabbos? What, you know the answer to this one? What do you do on Shabbos? What? What do you do on Shabbos?
Giving your goods to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Okay. So Masrei Kech brings a Rashi that on the last day of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, who gave Shiur? Yehoshua. Yehoshua gave Shiur. And what did Moshe Rabbeinu do? Moshe Rabbeinu was the Meturgaman. Why was Moshe Rabbeinu the Meturgaman? So that people shouldn't say, well, when Moshe was alive, Yehoshua was nothing. He's the Mamala Makam because there's nobody better. So Hashem dafka made it that Moshe Rabbeinu was the Meturgaman for Yehoshua for one day, so to give cover to Yehoshua. So Masrei Kech says, and what day was that? That was Moshe Rabbeinu's last day. And why did Moshe Rabbeinu have to pass away? So it says, in Malchus Noigas L'Chaverta K'may Nima. No two reigns could, infringe upon each other. So it says in Masrei Kech, the truth is, the last day of Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't for Moshe. It didn't do any Moshe Rabbeinu anything. It was a gift for Klal Yisrael, for Yehoshua, to be able to give Shiur that Moshe Rabbeinu was sitting there. So Moshe Rabbeinu's life, so to speak, was up Vav Adar. And then Hashem kept him around for one day, Zayin Adar, so that Yehoshua could be the Mamala Malkaim and continue on the legacy of Moshe Rabbeinu. So we should be Zoicha on this great day of Hoshana Rabba. It's the last day of the Parei HaChag, the day that all the Ummah Ha'olam dissipate. We should be Zoicha to see the dissipation of all the Sonei Yisrael. We should be Zoicha on the Shpizin of David HaMelech, Ben David, Yavai, V'Yigalenu, B'Mher V'Yameinu, Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.